he talks about how he was over, I don't know how many Satanists, call them churches. He was like the bishop.
You gotta be kidding me.
What was in her heart? You don't know what sin she'd committed. You don't know how much unbelief was there. You don't know whether she hated her husband.
I don't think so.
Why would anybody spend so much time ranting and raving about something that they don't believe in?
Really?
Welcome to Skeptics Brew Pub with Brother Brewer. And welcome to episode 18 of Skeptics Brew Pub. I'm your host, Brother Brewer. Tonight in the pub, it's a little bit different because tonight we're actually pre-recorded. We had a little bit of a scheduling conflict with Lauren, so we wound up recording this audio on Friday, and believe it or not, there was almost 2 hours of audio for us to go through on this. There was some pre-show stuff that was really interesting too, but it's not going to make the cut for the show tonight. But anywho, I just wanted to go ahead and let you know that this is pre-recorded, so there will not be a chat room tonight, and this will be available at 8:30 as usual, and will also be available at our usual channels. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. To get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Welcome to Skeptics Brew Pub. This is episode 18. I'm talking here with Lauren. Now, I'm still having a hard time, even though your name is like 4 letters, I'm still having a hard time pronouncing your last name.
It's pronounced Uhde.
Uhde, okay.
Like the letters U and D. It's German, and you could pronounce it Uhde if you're pretentious. But I don't really care. I'm over it, to be entirely honest.
So it's Lauren Uhde. She's also known on Facebook as Biology Babe. And she's working as a science educator, but she is also a graduate student in Portland that is specializing in immunology. How are you doing tonight?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Go ahead.
I lied. I'm not great. I'm vaccine injured.
Oh no, she's getting the autisms, ladies and gentlemen.
The autisms and the mind controls and the cancers.
Oh no! Well, if you get the chemtrails, we got a grand slam there. Now, before I jump into the questions, of course, I have to do this because this is my usual nod to Zach of the Zacrilege Cast. He told me that this is a brew pub, and I did not have enough beer in my podcast. So tonight, I am drinking, as I'm sitting here talking to you, it's called, from Mother's Brewing Company in Springfield, Missouri, it is called a Blush Pomegranate Hibiscus Wit Ale.
Does that count as beer?
Well, it depends. According to the Bolt, it doesn't, but yeah, that's another nice little German word.
Oh.
That's actually,
what does that mean?
It's actually the very first food law that was ever passed. In Germany during I want to say it was during the 17th century, and it was done for tax purposes. It put restrictions on what could be classified as a beer.
Interesting.
And what excludes this? Until Pasteur discovered yeast in the 19th century, it could only be classified for a beer. The only ingredients it could have is water, barley, and hops.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yep. And then when yeast was discovered, that they had to adjust it to include yeast. So those are the 4 ingredients of the Bolt, which was the very first food law ever passed.
So you can't have any additional additives.
Not for Germany to classify it as a beer.
Interesting.
And then there's also wheat beers, which are called the wit beers. Those are a little bit of a different classification. Those have to be up to 50% wheat and 50% barley malt.
I see. So no other grains.
No other grains
no
for
oats.
Beer. Right, no oats. Other countries have done oats and such, like Britain. Great Britain like to experiment to kind of cut into it. So they would have their oat stouts. Of course, they brew a lot more darker beers because that's what their water table is more inclined to, whereas in Germany, Belgium, especially out in the Pilsner region, is where you're going to find more of the lagers that are the lighter, crisper beers.
I see. Interesting. I'm not much of a beer aficionado.
Oh.
I would try to be, but it all tastes super bitter, sour, or like latex to me.
Well, you've not had a good one, then I take it.
I think I've had good beers. Other people tell me they're good beers. I just have a weird palate, I think. I used to drink a lot of cider, but recently I found that super dehydrating.
Okay.
I tried some meads recently. I went to the Oregon Brew Fest at the Museum of Science and Industry. They had OMSI After Dark, and everyone walked around and tried different beers. And I tried some meads there.
Mm-hmm.
Tried some beers, some meads, and the meads were awful. Like, I actually went to this presentation on what makes a mead, how meads are made, and it was both uninformative and absurd. But I did learn that mead is just honey, water, and yeast.
Right. It's basically just a honey wine.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. I'm surprised that they can get it that highly concentrated in alcohol, but I imagine that that's due to the kind of yeast that make mead.
Yeah, it's the way that, and it's also the sugar content as well, because as it's the byproduct of what the yeast do, because they eat the sugar and then they shit alcohol and carbon dioxide.
Yes. I was under the impression that they only produced a certain amount before they stopped, depending on the concentration of sugar they start with and the amount of alcohol they output. After a while, they shift their metabolism. They
do, and that's why there's different, like that article you posted with the different breeds or strains of yeast, and
exactly.
each one of them is designed for is bred for a different kind of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So
beautiful example of artificial selection.
Yes. Yep, and that was actually the accidental discovery of the yeast that's used for lagers, was because they found that in Germany that they would store the beer in caves, because that is, it's a cool place to be able to keep it, and it wouldn't be done fermenting. Well, the yeast that could handle the cooler temperatures is what today has become the lager yeast, which ferments actually differently from an ale yeast. There's two different classifications of beer, being that the lagers are what they call bottom fermenters that start from the bottom and work their way up and work in a colder temperature closer to freezing, whereas the ale as a top one, it goes from the top down, and they ferment like around room temperature.
Interesting. I would love to be more interested in beer, or I am interested in beer, but because I don't enjoy the taste of anything, it's really hard to keep track of it. Like, I can't keep track of flavor notes, and so it kind of all becomes a jumble.
Yeah.
Yeah, but fermentation, super cool. Food science in general is fascinating. I love food science. I like finding, especially from America's Test Kitchen, they have amazing videos about different scientific concepts in creating food. Something like they'll wash the starch out of flour and just show you what pure gluten looks like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, YouTube videos share really poorly on Facebook, my primary platform.
This is true. Now, you're what got you first interested into science? I mean, because it seems like you're very interested in. Of course, it's your big field of study right now. But how'd you get started into it?
I can't remember ever not being into it. I think that some people have a certain drive to figure out how things work, and once you figure out where the gaps, when you're taught something as a child, you're taught something really broadly, really broad concepts, the nuances is totally flattened. And then when you get older and you start taking more classes, you figure out gaps in the learning from before. And I've kind of never found an end to finding gaps. And there's nothing else that I could possibly be doing. Even if I had another career, if I was anything else, I would still be trying to figure out how things work. And when you figure out how things work, you can apply it and troubleshoot things. I just happen to have landed on immunology. When you start studying science, so when I went to college, I had enjoyed biology and chemistry classes in high school. And so I heard about this thing called biochemistry, and I was like, that sounds good. I didn't know what it was. I eventually figured it out. I got a degree. I did some medical research for about a year after I graduated, and then I just started applying to graduate programs. and I happened to land on an umbrella program, and they had an immunology department. I had an interest in virology, but I could have ended up in pure cancer biology or genetics or anything else. It just happened to work out that immunology had a little extra spark for me.
Okay.
There's just a lot of things to figure out, a lot of interactions. It's hard to describe because when I talk to most people about immunology to them is either something nebulous that they don't quite understand, or they understand that it's a study of your immune system. Basically, your immune system is what, as a kid, you're calling white blood cells.
Mm-hmm.
And as an immunologist, white blood cells become maybe 30 different subtypes of cells, and they all have intricate interplay. They have their own chemical signaling between each other. And that's super cool to me, that inside of my body, there are billions of cells that are talking to themselves and monitoring the status of my health constantly. And I don't have to think about a damn thing. Seems like learning about them is the least I could do.
Yeah, I mean, well, there are a lot of different things in science that I'm interested in, and fortunately for me, my son, who just turned 9, has been interested in the idea of being a biologist ever since he saw Wildcrats when he was
that's
about
fantastic.
5. So
I remember the Kraft Brothers from when I was a kid. I watched, and then they came out with Zaboomafoo.
Yes.
And then the cartoon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my daughter's hooked on Zaboomafoo, and my son has been hooked on Wildcrats. And he impressed his first grade teacher, oh Lord, it was like 3 years ago, because she was talking about fireflies, and he was able to describe to her what bioluminescence was at 6.
That's incredible. That is fantastic. I don't think I could have pronounced bioluminescence at 6. Excuse me. Was that about fireflies, jellyfish?
Yeah, fireflies.
That's fantastic. We don't have fireflies here, so I didn't learn about bioluminescence until I got to college.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
We chase them every summer.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love hearing about parents just hanging out with their kids and learning about nature. It's like it's a very specific kind of parenting where you let the kid just fuck with shit, and then you explain it when they have questions. And I really love seeing that happen.
Yeah, it's really amazing because, like I said, my son is looking to be a biologist, and my daughter, I'm not sure if she's going to go. So far, I can't tell if she's going to go into the fashion industry or if she's going to be some kind of an artist.
How old is she?
She just turned 7.
That's when I was 7. I wanted to be like Brandy, a model, singer, actress. So the world is open to her.
Yeah, she is such a girly girl that it just absolutely amazes me. I mean,
how did you produce this?
Yeah, well, I asked that with both of them, and then I look at their mom and go, "Yeah, that's it. That's how it happened."
That's where the good genes came from.
Yeah. And the problem is that with my son that he inherited my wife's smarts and my ADHD, and so I'm afraid that he's going to be in the lab in high school and accidentally blow up the school or something.
Oh, that could be it. When you find something that you really enjoy, do you have as much trouble focusing on it? Or is it just things that you're forced to focus on?
It's mostly things that you're forced to focus on because part of the issue, your brain for the most part, because it's a lot of the higher functioning, like your impulse control and your attention span. But if you find something that you're interested in, it releases certain dopamine and enhancements in your brain. And those bring your attention span like right there into what you're doing, and that's all you can focus on. It's almost like obsessing on that for a while. Like you can go and get absorbed into a book, but if you try to sit and do something that is mundane or that you just can't get interested in, you go off in another direction because it's like normally your brain is, they call it attention deficit, but it's more like attention overload because you're trying to pay attention to everything around you. Just nothing will grab your focus.
I can relate to that. Smart people often, that totally made it sound like a humble brag, but I mean people who have specific interests in very specific concepts